So our exhibition is called Printmaking Its People. So we specifically focused on, of course, printmaking from the 16th century. And the reason we focused on specifically printmaking and people was because the everyday person was suddenly able to get a hold of art with the introduction of the printing press into art. The focus of art had shifted. Artists were able to create work intended to be viewed by a larger audience through means of multiple editions of the same print being sold. Artists also turned to create artwork that was relatable so that it would be easier to sell to multiple people. And it depicted oftentimes the working class or activities they may partake in or things that were just easily recognizable, as we'll see later. Printmaking, I feel, was very truly the medium for the people, or at least the common day person. First up, we have Milkmaid by Lucas Van Leyden. So we talked about this one in class some, but I thought it was apt to include this in our exhibition because this is one of the most classic, depicts working day people, and also includes comedy in it. Which is primarily, the idea of creating prints that are easily marketed to the working class. So this print shows some of the chores that would be done in a comedic fashion. The milkmaid carrying a bucket of milk, and she has her breasts obviously prominent, and the farmhand gazing at her in a somewhat seductive manner. And then the cow and bull are reflective of this as well. And so, the level of humor and how the cow is there, and then the farmhand, and then the tree stump, it created a print that was very easily marketed to people through its comedy and also through its subject matter.
So this is probably one of the most recognizable scenes from the Bible, the original sin, where Eve presents Adam with the forbidden fruit. So during this time, most of the people in Europe were illiterate, other than like very rich men or maybe some women. So most of their stories would be passed down orally, so they couldn't really tell every single story of the Bible. It would take a really long time. So they would kind of focus on the bigger ones. So Adam and Eve was the biggest one, mostly. So this print would be very recognizable to the working class. I know whenever I go to the store and I see like a shirt or something or a print with a reference to a show I like or a book I've read, I want to buy it. So I think this print would make it so the working class would recognize this and just kind of want to buy it, have it in their home. It would be like an easy story that everyone knows, and it's just recognizable to everyone, so it would be a good print to have in your home. So other than this story being very recognizable, the print is very beautiful. The focus being the forbidden fruit, and then your eye kind of travels to who is handing the fruit to who, and you go up Adam's arm, up the tree, and then you see the serpent, and you kind of recognize the story that's being told and how prominent this story is in the Bible. So in Europe during this time, people weren't able to travel to places like Africa or Asia or anywhere really, other than where they lived. So usually the rich, sometimes kings, would keep zoos, like in the Tower of London. I know they had a zoo there that kept elephants, lions, I believe even a rhinoceros. So artists and the elites would go see these zoos, or they would be lucky enough to go travel to places where these animals were living. So the artist who went to go see these things, like Albrecht Dürer, he went to go see a rhinoceros, I believe, once or twice in his life, and then he made this print. He made this print so the everyday person would be able to see it and hang it up in their home. It's kind of so people could see the curiosities that the world would have to offer, bringing them to their own home, just so the everyday person would have the experience and be able to see it. So The Standard Bearer and the Drummer by Sebald Biam pays homage to the Peasant War, which was one of the biggest uprisings in European history up until the French Revolution. This print is humanizing the peasants who may have died and fought in this war, and it kind of shows a calm before the storm, having a nice little moment between these two. The drummer is smiling at the bearer. This print would be very recognizable to any working class, lower class people of this time, because this war was only about 50 years before this print was made. So it would be these people's parents, grandparents that were fighting in this war that lost their lives, perhaps. And it just humanizes the fact that, so it really humanizes the peasants of this time. Most governments, after an uprising, they try and silence the people. And I feel like this print is a nice little rebellion against that. It's kind of an homage to the people who may have died or lost their lives for their cause. So overall, this print is a pleasant scene between a couple of men that resonates with the working class or lower class people. So they would want to buy it, and they'd want to hang it up in their home to remember their dead or to remember why they fought this war.
Next, we have Head of Man by Sebald Biam. And so this was it was designed to be a woodcut, and is, of course, aptly named. It is a head of a man. Unfortunately, he was not able to execute this design himself before his death, a year later. But Biam creates a portrait of a man that is grimacing and looks kind of funny. So even though we don't know who this man is or relate to him in any sort of manner, I think that it's a funny looking portrait that people would want to get a hold of because it's a funny looking man. They can show their friends and laugh at it together. So again, this one it uses a role of comedy, as we've talked about throughout this presentation. So yeah, I think that this gnarly-faced, tongue hanging out would be intended for the commoner to laugh at and want to take it home to show their friends and laugh at it together.
So Big Fish Eat the Little Fish by Peter Bruegel the Elder is probably one of the weirdest prints we will look at today. This scene is of a big fish, obviously, and some man cutting him open and all these smaller fish pouring out. And if you look at the smaller fish, there's even smaller fish coming out of those ones. And everywhere you look, there's kind of weird things going on. I know on the land behind the biggest fish, there's a fish with legs walking on land. There's fish being walked up into the trees, fish flying in the skies. And it's just a really weird print. So other than the obvious weirdness of this print and how fun it is to look at, there is a meaning behind it. The idea behind it comes from the ancient Latin proverb, "Look, son, I have long known the big fish eat the small." And that kind of is talking to the lower class people, saying that the upper class people always find a way to prey on them and blame them for all their problems. And it kind of just serves as a reminder to the working class people that even though these people are always preying on them, that they still can triumph over the big fish. As the man with the knife is doing in this print.
So the last three prints that we included in this exhibition are all from the same series created by Hans Holbein, from The Dance of Death. So this included 49 prints. Yeah, 49, quite a few, and they all have to deal with death in the way that it is ever present in everyone's lives. So we started off by including creation because it was the first print of the series, and it was kind of like aptly done that it was the first print in the series. So creation is a very well-known story in the Bible, throughout Christianity and Catholicism even. And, the creation of man and animals and plants and everything meant that there would also be a life cycle that involved death in it as well. So by depicting this scene, it would be easily recognizable even to the illiterate, that, this was the creation of people, animals, etc., and how even at this beautiful time there is still death that occurs. And this also, I think, is important to note that all of these are very small size. They're like 4 postage stamps wide. So it's very small. And I would almost liken it to like a playing card that is a collectible, like a baseball card or what have you. Like, can you collect all 49? And so that probably also made it much more affordable and much easier to get a hold of, but also technically would be very easy to lose. So yeah. The second one that we included is Old Woman, and this one actually shows the skeletons that is seen in many of the scenes from the Dance of Death. They include skeletons as this omen of death in a way. A lot of times they're playing instruments or dancing or like fooling with people and tricking them in some manner. So, yeah, you see an old woman with a cane and she's walking around, and you have 2 skeletons in the back. One's playing a xylophone, the other is seemingly going to strike her, which I think is kind of a funny little scene that's going on. She's like kind of unsuspecting, and then all of a sudden she's gonna get struck down. Yeah. So the last one that we included is also kind of aptly named and included because it's the Last Judgment. Also the last of the series of the Dance of Death. This again is a very common biblical scene, and even if you aren't Christian, you still probably know about the Last Judgment. So here we see Jesus with all of the people that made it to heaven, and Jesus is sitting on a globe, and then all of the people that did not make it into heaven are like sitting at the bottom of the globe. And you can see everyone's just kind of scrambling. And of course, this also means death is upon everyone, whether or not you make it into heaven or hell. That is the judgment call. So, yeah. Even the illiterate would be able to understand this, which is important because there is still a good portion of the population that could not read, but they would have been able to recognize all of these things, which I think is very important, that prints were able to be relatable to everybody.
So as Lily was saying, with the Dance of Death, through every print, it starts with the Pope and then goes down to every classification of people down to the beggar. And in every print, death is making a fool of that person, showing that nobody can escape death. And it's just a really important thing, saying that in the end, these people are no better than the beggar, the Pope, the king, the emperor. They're no better. So it's just kind of an equalizer. Death is the great equalizer, and these prints show that. And so these prints would be very well liked with the common people. And once again, it just kind of reiterates the fact that these prints are for the people. If you go down, starting looking at the ones with the Pope, you see that death makes a mockery of those people. And then as you go down, kind of death is making less and less of a mockery. Ending with the beggar, there's not even death depicted in that picture. It's just people looking at the beggar. So it just kind of is equalizing, and death is making a fool out of all these people except the lower class people. So I think it's very interesting that Holbein chose to do that. So kind of in conclusion, whether the print is about stories they may know, daily tasks that the working people endure, or curiosities of the world, the prints resonate with the people, and it kind of takes art out of the hands of the elite and puts it into the hands of the people. And I think that's a very important notion that took a while to happen. And while these aren't the size of the masterpieces in the Louvre, they're the size of a playing card, they are still equally as important to the everyday person, if not even more important, because it shows the daily trials and tribulations that these people went through on a daily basis. And that's kind of why printmaking was so important and why it resonates with so many people.